Well, it's day 2 of the Biden administration, and apparently it's already time to start discussing abolishing the Senate filibuster. Since there is a 50-50 Senate, there's not a whole lot that the Democrats could really do with the filibuster intact. The filibuster rule, for those who don't know, makes it so that you need 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. And so that means either one party needs a really, really big majority in the Senate of at least 60 seats, or you need at least a few people from the other party to vote to pass your bill. The rule's been there since, well, at least since the 1870s, I believe. But obviously, in a very divided America, there's not much that you could get 10 of the Republican senators to go along with the Democrats on. And ordinarily, that'd be a good thing, because then that means that they couldn't get much done, except through budget reconciliation, which is how they did Obamacare. Obamacare, I believe, got through with only, needing a simple majority. But don't quote me on that. Anyway, what the Democrats want to get done, understandably, is a regime where they can pass bills with only a simple majority on any bill, not just, budget reconciliation in special cases like that. Of course, it was Harry Reid who first started this. He nuked the filibuster for lower court nominations, I believe it was, and then Mitch McConnell nuked it for Supreme Court nominations, so that those would require just a simple majority to pass. And so, it's obvious the next, the next step in this process is to get rid of it for all bills. And, without getting rid of the filibuster, all these things that I've been talking about, like that big amnesty program, any potential gun control measures, all of that would be out the window if the filibuster was still intact. So you're not going to get any sort of you're not going to get too much of a serious escalation in political conflict in this country. Certainly, escalation between the federal government and the states without abolishing the filibuster. Now, with that said, since that amnesty thing is on the table, just giving citizenship blanket to all the illegals, I would prefer if the filibuster remains, because that's pretty dangerous. That's something that even someone like me, who's optimistic about where our politics is heading, as far as the accelerating polarization and increase in conflict, that to me is a bridge too far. And so to abolish the filibuster, the Democrats need only a simple majority to change the rule, I believe. So that would mean that they need Sinema, Manchin, all of the Democrats, every single one. And that to me is a bit of a tall order. It's not 100% certain that those two would go along with it. Sinema, interestingly enough, she's gotten pretty horrible since she got into the Senate. Before she was in the Senate, she was a anti-war activist. She's very much walked that back since running for Senate. She's tried to become, more of a moderate Democrat, because she was running in Arizona, which has been a solid red state for certainly my entire life. Joe Manchin, of course, is in, just about the deepest red state, West Virginia. He almost certainly will not win re-election. So, the question is, does he even care at this point whether he appeases his voters or not? A lot of people see Joe Manchin as someone who kind of plays the moderate game, acts like a swing vote, kind of an Anthony Kennedy type in the public sphere, but behind the scenes is pretty well in line with his caucus and does as he's told. Reminds me a bit of the dynamic of Rand Paul, although Joe Manchin is much less boisterous and outgoing than Rand Paul. But the way that Rand Paul works is that he's a senator from Kentucky. Okay, that's the state that Mitch McConnell's from. Rand Paul serves in the Senate at the pleasure of McConnell. If McConnell wanted Rand Paul gone, he'd be gone. And so while Paul has to, he likes to, make his points on the Senate floor, he likes to use it as his platform to talk about all the terrible things that the government is doing, and I very much applaud him for that. At the end of the day, when Mitch says, Rand, you have to vote for this, Rand is going to vote for it. And Rand only votes against stuff when he kind of has the okay from McConnell. And so while he is able to, make his, his grandstanding and say, okay, this bill is so terrible or whatever, he's only really allowed to do that because McConnell knows he has enough votes without Rand Paul. And I think Joe Manchin is in a similar situation with the Democrats, although I don't think that the Democratic Party has the leverage over Joe Manchin that that the Republicans have over Rand Paul. So that would make me think that, maybe Manchin would be a little bit more flexible and maybe more so trying to appease his voters rather than the Democratic Party, since Joe Manchin is the last remaining statewide elected Democrat in West Virginia, I believe. And so if he votes to get rid of the filibuster, I mean, that would just he would be a pariah in his own community. Because abolishing the filibuster is what makes everything else that the Democrats want to do possible. Joe Manchin does not have to give up being a Democrat. He doesn't have to cross the aisle and become a Republican and give them the majority necessarily. All he has to do, really, to serve the interests of his voters and to serve as a check on the the Democrats' agenda would be to block the filibuster. Because then, if the filibuster is still in place, then, there's not a whole lot of concern. The political temperature will be a lot lower. And so that's how I basically view the Democrat side on this. Sinema, I think she could go along with this. Kelly, who's new, I think he definitely would go along with it. But Manchin, to me, is the one that I just don't know. A lot of people are going to tell you, no, Joe Manchin will go right along with whatever the party says. And I tend to think that might be the case. But, I mean, it would be so suicidal for him. Does he really want to throw everything away? I mean, he's definitely not an ideological Democrat by any means. He's purely a Machiavelli. I mean, there's this old meme of him from years ago that always applies so well. And it was him standing next to a bunch of young kids at the march. I think it was around the time of the March for Life, and they were holding some kind of like pro-life sign, and he was taking a picture with them. And then next to that, there's a picture of him standing with a bunch of young kids holding "Shout Your Abortion" signs. So he's on every side of every issue. He just wants to be everything to all people. But then again, if Schumer couldn't count on his vote, I don't think that we'd be hearing this much about the possibility anyway. I don't know if, because, Schumer's been pretty strong on this. We're getting rid of the filibuster. We're getting stuff done. Schumer's been saying this for a long time. So he's had plenty of time to talk to Joe Manchin about how he'd vote on that. Now, with all that out of the way about Manchin, there are quite a few liberal Republicans or Republicans who are sympathetic to the Democratic Party, even if they themselves are certainly not leftists by any means. I wouldn't go that far. But you've got Murkowski, Collins, and Mitt Romney. Would any of them vote for this? And I think the answer is absolutely not, because part of their persona, well, I can't say so much about Murkowski, but certainly Romney and Collins, is that they're all about norms. They're about, playing the game fair and square, and I don't think that changing the rules of the game is something that either of them would go along with, and certainly not when McConnell is telling them you can't go along with that. I mean, Collins even voted for Kavanaugh, so, when Mitch tells her to get in line, she'll get in line. Romney has no plans for running for re-election, but, I don't think that he's to the point to where he would think that abolishing the filibuster is a good thing. I think that he feels like the Republicans have excised Trump, and now this is a good thing. Now they can hold the Democrats accountable themselves. And so, with Romney, all of his overtures to the left were based purely on trying to virtue signal against Trump. With Trump out of the way, I think he has no interest in trying to gut the power, what little power the Republican Party has left, particularly, when you have a Democratic trifecta at the left, federal level. There's no sense of balance left. The only thing keeping any bit of balance in Washington is the filibuster. So I would expect a vote on the repealing the filibuster to come before there's any real major legislation, because, frankly, there's, amnesty is not going to get through with the filibuster. No chance. It's not even a discussion. So this will come up as soon as the impeachment nonsense is over with, which, frankly, the impeachment trial thing is absurd, because you can't impeach someone who doesn't hold office. You can't impeach a private citizen. It's ridiculous. And at this point, if they do it just to say, oh, okay, well, Trump can't run for president in 4 years, well, I mean, he could sue that in court, and the Supreme Court would have to totally eviscerate the Constitution to say, to rule that, yeah, it was okay for the Senate to impeach a president who was no longer president. And that would only make Trump look good. So I don't see what the point in that is, because Trump at that point could just as easily say, okay, well, I can't run. I'm going to endorse this one guy and campaign with him. And so, hey, vote for whoever my chosen candidate is. If you want, if you would have supported me, because these people cheated me out of it. I mean, that would just be such a dumb idea for them to impeach him at this point. So I don't really care either way if they do. But once that nonsense is over and done with, it'll be moving on to this filibuster fight. And this will be interesting because it will determine just how fast things are going to move from here. Once the filibuster is gone, I think we're going to take off like a rocket. And the next 2 years will have to be a flurry of bills. And again, even after once the filibuster's gone, would somebody like Manchin vote for amnesty? Maybe not, but you might find a couple of Republicans who will. I mean, you have Rubio and Lindsey Graham who were on the Gang of Eight. But I think both of them at this point have been punished enough so that they probably wouldn't go along with that again. But somebody like Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was born in Mexico. He might say, hey, that's just fine to bring in 30 million new people and let them vote in all these states and turn them blue. That's what the Republicans deserve. Mitt Romney might feel that way. I mean, if Dems lose Manchin, it only would take one Republican to make up for him voting against amnesty. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of exciting stuff ahead. I mean, normally Congress is very boring. I haven't talked about Congress at all in the years since I started this channel. I've talked about the Pentagon, talked about the CIA, talked about wars in the Middle East. But now, we're at the point to where the war is at home. It's less important which regimes overseas the U.S. is stabilizing when the U.S. itself, or destabilizing when the U.S. itself is becoming destabilized. And that's the way I look at it. I'm looking at this the same way I look at any of these countries around the world. I mean, that's kind of what a running theme on this channel is I monitor political instability. And so I guess one last note on that before I go. At this point, to me, what we would want to see moving forward is filibuster gone. They try to do amnesty, they fail. That scares a lot of people. They realize, oh God, the Dems really do want to just pack everything full. And then the Dems are able to get through, like they lose on amnesty, but they win on DC and Puerto Rico, adding those as states, packing the Senate, making it so that Republicans can't ever, take the Senate again, at least not with a very, very big victory. Then 2 years from now, Republicans take back the House. There's lots of division there. Although I might be getting ahead of myself there. There's a lot that can come that can still destabilize the federal government before that. And I think adding states is going to be one of those things. Once you start packing the Senate that way, the Republicans are going to do the same thing, if they get in there. And at that point, there's no point to the Union to having all these states if you're just going to keep, because what the Republicans will do is they'll just break up all the red states into a bunch of smaller states that, sure, it won't change the House, but what it'll do is it'll give each of these new states 2 Senate seats. So Texas will be broken up into a bunch of pieces. Even small states, let's say Wyoming, you split in 2, then, because right now Wyoming only has 1 member of the House, they would get a second, that new state would get 2 new Senate seats and a new seat in the House. You could do the same thing with North and South Dakota. You could do the same thing with Montana. You could do the same thing with Idaho. You could do the same thing with Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana maybe. Well, Louisiana might be a little tough because of New Orleans, but Missouri, you might be able to do it with. You could split off, the bottom half of Illinois from the part that has Chicago and create a new red state out of Illinois. You could, there's tons of stuff that could be done. And at that point, just if we get down that road, there will be no logic, there will be no meaning to the United States. I mean, I'm looking forward, and I see so many paths that we could go down, and none of them lead to getting back to normal order in our government. It is all sort of late stage decay, and so my hopes is that in all that unrest, political unrest, we do not have any sort of violent unrest. That there isn't, people fighting in the streets or anything like that, which we've seen a little bit of that, but hopefully that doesn't become widespread ever. I mean, the Union is very clearly coming apart, and I just hope that it comes apart in a peaceful way, the way that the Soviet Union came apart. That's what I would like to see here in the United States. Because one of these days, what's going to happen, all these escalations, you've got adding the illegal immigrants, making them voters, trying to pack states full of Democrat votes, pack the ballot box essentially in certain states. You've got trying to pack the Senate through adding states, which both sides can do. That's something that the Republicans could play into. If the Democrats do that and the federal government holds itself together until the Republicans regain control, the Republicans can very easily split up a bunch of states, as I discussed. Did I say gun control? I mean, there's a Green New Deal. Any of these sorts of things could be flashpoints that could lead to states saying, we're done, we're getting out of here, we can't deal with this government anymore. Who knows? Maybe after adding the D.C. and Puerto Rico, Texas says, okay, that's it, we're done. We're fed up with this. The system is being rigged openly, and we're not going to play that game. Somebody like Michael Malice thinks that would be a big red line, adding 2 states. I'm not so sure if that would be the case. But again, as we continue down this road, there's going to be a line that's crossed somewhere that is enough for one state to throw up their hands and say, I'm done. And once the first domino falls, it all comes apart. It's just like when they decided to open the border between East and West Berlin, and they said, hey, you can go across. The wall itself crumbled immediately. All of the Eastern Bloc just crumbled. All of those countries were able to essentially regain independence from Russia. And obviously, we're not exactly living behind the Iron Curtain, but it's a similar analogy in that, or it's a very similar situation in that the current order is coming apart before our very eyes. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.